This is the Center This Week, highlighting the latest trends and best practices for improving government effectiveness. Brought to you by the IBM Center for the Business of Government. I'm Michael Keegan, Managing Editor of the Business of Government magazine. The Center This Week is our opportunity to inform and, most importantly, to invite you, our listeners, to use the IBM Center for the Business of Government as your resource, a how-to resource for improving government effectiveness at the state, local, and federal level. Hello, I'm Michael Keegan from the IBM Center for the Business of Government and host of the Business of Government Hour. I'm here with my colleague, John Kamensky, Senior Fellow at the Center, and we're here to discuss a recent IBM Center report by Professor Jane Fountain, Implementing Cross-Agency Collaboration, a Federal Manager's Guide. And John, the idea of cross-agency collaboration and the need for it, the importance of it, has been around for decades, and academics as well as practitioners have discussed its critical importance. But things have changed. The environment has changed. That makes it more achievable and more necessary today. Can you tell us a little bit what's changed?
Sure. There's three things that have changed. First of all, public expectations have changed. Second of all, the technology now enables the ability to do this. And third is that there's new statutory authority, at least at the federal level, to make this much more possible. So, for example, with public expectations, the shift has been from responding to a public challenge, for example, crime, to preventing. And so when you move to preventive strategy, it requires a different approach. And the new technologies, for example, allow us. For example, if you look at crime, in the past, the focus had been on police responding to a crime scene. Today, if the expectation is to prevent the crime in the first place, then what you need to do is have social services agencies involved, religious organizations, youth organizations, in addition to the police and social services and others. And this is a much more complex environment to work in. And the federal level also has similar challenges. For example, in food safety, there's more than a dozen federal agencies involved. You have the Center for Disease Control tracking what's going on. And if you want to have a preventive response to that, it requires a lot more challenge. The new law allows agencies to work across agency boundaries in a way that wasn't permitted in the past. And so this is where the new opportunities lie.
And I'd like to talk about that new law, GPRA modernization, the Act of 2010. It actually makes it much more achievable because it instantiates in the law this idea of cross-agency collaboration. Yes. Could you tell us a little bit more about the requirements associated with GPRA?
Certainly. The cross-agency provisions in the law require the Office of Management and Budget and the White House to identify a handful of goals. Right now they've identified about 14 that reach across agency boundaries. And they are to be like 3 to 4 years in length, to not require new resources, but their existing policy, existing laws, focuses on implementation, getting something done. One of them is to double exports by the end of 2014. And they started on this several years ago, but the person and they also require that a person be designated as a goal leader and report progress on a quarterly basis. So Jason Furman in the White House, as assistant to the president, is the goal leader for doubling exports. There's more than a dozen federal agencies involved. There's over 40 different federal programs involved. And there's a strategy that's been developed and progress is being made.
So it's clear that this report has been published at an opportune time. So John, in the
Yes.
previous segment, you did a wonderful job of illustrating a new environment that makes cross-agency collaboration possible, more achievable. Professor Fountain, in her report, identifies two dimensions that illustrate successful cross-agency collaboration or collaboration in general, and they are people and process. And I'd like to focus on the people.
Okay.
What are the characteristics of an effective cross-agency collaborative manager?
Well, an effective cross-agency collaborative manager focuses on listening, focuses on respect and fairness within the team, but also brings to the team a network of people that he or she has worked with before, but also with the team looks beyond her own agency or her own function and reaches out to others to create a common operating environment so that they can see the broader picture of what's going on.
So that's the leader. What about the conditions for an effective team?
Well, Dr. Fountain describes a set of conditions for an effective team. For example, one is to have a clear definition of the boundaries of what that team is supposed to be focusing on. Second is a clearly defined goal or focus for what the team will do. The third is that the team needs to have a set of resources that the team can pull upon, and then a defined team structure. So the structure of the team, the roles of the members on the team are clearly defined. And then finally, you have to have a champion for the team so that it has the ability to move forward if it runs into any barriers. A good example is the interagency team focusing on reducing improper payments.
Mm-hmm.
The chief financial officers across the government are jointly working on this. This is the champion as the controller out of the Office of Management and Budget. They have clearly defined goals of how much they need to reduce in terms of improper payments, agency by agency, but also across agencies. And the Treasury, for example, becomes the place where agencies turn to for information, for example, the do not pay list.
So John, that was the people dimension that we discussed, and Professor Fountain also identifies the process dimension or the organizational dimension. Can you tell us what are some of the key organizational processes that need to be in place for enhancing cross-agency collaboration?
Well, Dr. Fountain developed a list based on the experience of the research she's done over the past 20 years or more in looking at collaborative organizations. So, for example, setting clear targets or goals with milestones so that they can see progress along the way and celebrate small successes. Another is to have, as I mentioned earlier, specified clear roles and responsibilities for the team members and formalized agreements among key parties. And the reason for that is that as members rotate off, there's some sustainability that, and commitments by the organizations that are involved. And then developing a shared operation center is an important element because that provides a focal point for the agencies to be working under. And then finally, as adapt through shared learning, that come together periodically to sort of learn about what works and what doesn't work so that they can quickly and agilely change operations if needed.
Great. So I'd like to focus on the shared learning aspect. What insights would you be able to give a cross-agency collaborative leader regarding shared learning? What can they do about it?
Well, there's an example that happened relatively recently with the implementation of the Recovery Act. Ed DeSette from the Office of Management and Budget and the Vice President's Office would weekly convene teams by phone across agencies to sort of go through what worked this week, what didn't work this week, and they could quickly change whatever their policies or procedures were so they could adapt to this and move forward to the next step. And this whole notion of adaptive learning is an important, or shared learning is an important element when you're working in a collaborative
The
environment.
report by Jane Fountain does a wonderful job of identifying and describing certain recommendations. It offers recommendations to two groups. One in particular is OMB, the Office of Management and Budget, and the other is cross-agency collaborative leaders. I'd like to focus on the OMB recommendations. What's a significant one in the report?
Well, OMB, in her mind, is where the catalyst for cross-agency collaboration needs to reside. But what she also says is that OMB should develop guidance to agencies so they have some expectations of what works, what doesn't work in the eyes of OMB. And also they're able to draw on the lessons learned from the experience of others.
Yeah. So what are the ingredients for successful collaboration?
Well, Dr. Fountain talks about a set of ingredients for successful collaborative leaders around four elements. First of all, you have to have the right kind of relationship skills. And that was around her part of the report saying, what are the elements for a collaborative leader. The second is you have to have effective teams, which she talked about in her report. The third is that the team members, as well as team leadership, have to have a network of professional relationships that reach across agency boundaries and sometimes across sectoral boundaries to be able to get things done. And then finally, this notion of shared learning is that they need to be able to get together and learn from each other and change and adapt as needed.
Well, John, I want to thank you for your time today. This has been a wonderful, insightful introduction into a very useful and timely report by Professor Jane Fountain, Implementing Cross-Agency Collaboration, Federal Manager's Guide. You can order or download a copy of this report and all Center reports at businessofgovernment.org.
Thank you very much, Mike.
More information on this and other Center resources is available at businessofgovernment.org. There you will find how the business of government is not business as usual. For the IBM Center for the Business of Government, I'm Michael Keegan, and this has been the Center This Week.